The air was thick with the stench of blood, sweat, and scorched linen. Outside, rifles cracked like thunder. Inside the barn-turned-hospital, Catherine Rollins pressed a blood-soaked cloth to a soldier's abdomen, her hands slick, shaking. Not from fear but from rage. "Hold him down," she snapped. Private Eli Booker obeyed, his freckled arms straining as the wounded man kicked and bucked on the table. Another bullet split the barn wall a few feet above Kat's head, with splinters raining down. "We're not gonna make it, are we?" Eli muttered. "Shut up and keep pressure." She reached for the sutures, needle trembling only once before she steeled it through the shredded flesh. He didn't speak again. The soldier beneath her, a boy really, couldn't have been more than 17, faded fast. Too much blood lost. His name was Davies. She remembered every name. She stitched until the color in his face drained, until his lips stopped moving, until the rattling breath went still. Then she set the needle down, clenched her fists and said nothing. May O'Connor appeared in the barn doorway, dragging a crate of powder rolls and morphine. "We're down to 3 shots of laudanum, and 1 morphine syringe with a bent needle," she said, tossing the crate into the corner. "Bellamy says if we live till sundown, we get to die in the dark instead." May's words were sharp, but her voice cracked on the last one. She wiped her face with a sleeve, leaving a streak of blood on her cheek. She didn't seem to notice. Kat stepped away from the table, pulled off her stained apron, and stood over the boy's body. "We patch them up," May continued. "Then they die anyway. Tell me what that is, Kat. Tell me why we're here." "We were supposed to heal," Kat said quietly. "Not bury." Thunder rolled. Not from the sky, but the cannon stationed on the hillside. Somewhere to the east, something exploded with enough force to rattle the barn's frame. A scream followed. Then silence. "You too!" Someone bellowed from outside. Colonel Bellamy, voice raw. "Front lines re-gone. Get your things. If you're breathing, you're fighting." May gave a bitter laugh. "And if you're bleeding?" "Then you fight harder," Kat said, pulling on her boots. They emerged into hell. The outpost looked like a graveyard scattered with broken wagons, collapsed tents and bodies. Some moving, most not. Fires had sprung up in the grass beyond the camp where the bandits had set their traps. Smoke drifted like ghosts between the skeletal trees. Bellamy stood tall, though his coat was torn and his face bandaged. One arm hung useless at his side. "We've got 1 horse that can still gallop, and 24 men who can't even stand," he said as the women approached. "Town called Cold River just sent word. Bandits are headed that way next. No men to spare. No time." "And you want us to ride out there?" May asked, voice tight. "I want someone to get there before the bastards do," Bellamy said. "You're what's left." Kat's jaw clenched. "We're medics." Bellamy's bloodshot eyes didn't blink. "Not today." She thought of Davies. Of the boy from yesterday with half a face, still smiling when she fed him water. Of the farmer's daughter in Cold River, who had stitched her own father's arm shut with twine. "If we say no?" May asked. "Then they die," Bellamy said. "And we follow." May cursed in Irish under her breath, then kicked the dirt. "Do we at least get rifles?" Bellamy pointed to a crate beside the supply tent. Inside were 2 battered rifles, a pair of pistols, and a scattering of ammunition. Beside them lay a rusting saber. Kat lifted one of the pistols. It was heavier than she remembered. Her hand didn't tremble. "Not this time." "I can ride," said a voice behind them. Eli. Still bandaged, still limping. But alive. He had a revolver holstered already, slung low on his hip. "No," Kat said. "You're not ready." "I wasn't ready when I got shot." "Doesn't matter." They stared at each other, an unspoken memory between them. A night months ago when he lay bleeding out beneath a wagon wheel, and she, shaking and exhausted, had dragged him back through a hail of bullets. He'd nearly died. He hadn't thanked her. He'd just gotten back up. May tossed him a canteen. "Then make yourself useful, soldier boy." By sundown, they were packed. 3 horses, 6 women, and a boy not yet healed. The others, Cook staff, older medics and stretcher hands, stayed behind to care for the last of the wounded. Kat led them down the western trail toward Cold River. The map Bellamy gave them was smeared with blood and barely legible. But she remembered the way. She'd been there once. Years ago. They rode through ravaged fields and charred homesteads, the horizon glowing faintly with firelight. A child's doll lay discarded near a broken fence. A man hung from a tree, stripped and silent, buzzards circling overhead. May saw it first and crossed herself. No one spoke. The silence was worse than gunfire. As night fell, they made camp under a stand of pines. The fire was small, no more than glowing coals. Kat sat apart, cleaning her pistol. "You've used one before," May said, settling beside her with a tin cup of weak coffee. Kat nodded. "My father was a bounty hunter." May blinked. "You never said." "Didn't need to." "What happened to him?" Kat's fingers paused over the barrel. "He got old. Slower than his enemies." May didn't push. The fire snapped softly. "I didn't want this life," Kat said. "I taught school before I signed up. Thought maybe I could help. Heal. Fix something." May chuckled without humor. "I was a seamstress. Got tired of sewing wedding dresses for girls who married drunks." Kat raised an eyebrow. "So you picked blood over whiskey?" "No," May said, voice flat. "They're often the same." They shared a rare smile. In the dead of night, a crackling came from the trees. Kat was up first, pistol drawn. The others roused quickly, weapons in hand. Two men emerged, scraggly, bandoliers slung over dust-coated jackets. One carried a torch. The other carried a rifle pointed lazily in their direction. "Well, what do we have here?" said the one with the torch. "A traveling circus? Or is this a joke?" "Just passing through," Kat said evenly, not lowering her weapon. The man snorted. "You're medics, ain't ya? We seen your kind at Fort Wexler. Always bandaging the same men who die an hour later." "You can go," she said. "We're not interested in trouble." "I am," he said with a smile, lifting the rifle. The shot rang out before the others could react. Not from the bandit's rifle, from May's. She'd stepped up, calm as dawn, and fired through the man's neck. He dropped like a sack of oats. The other froze. Then ran. Kat ran after him. She didn't call out. Didn't warn. Just aimed and fired once. He fell. She stood over the body in the darkness, smoke trailing from her barrel. Back at camp, May sat down hard, blinking. "I just killed a man." "No," Kat said, returning. "You saved us." They didn't sleep much after that. The wind rose before morning, stirring ashes and nerves. By dawn, Cold River's spire came into view over the next ridge. The smoke rising behind it was fresh. Too fresh. They rode harder. The town was half-burned, quiet, deserted. A few townsfolk, mostly women and children, emerged from hiding when they arrived. One woman, her dress torn and face bruised, stared in disbelief. "They sent women?" Kat dismounted, rifle in hand. "We're what's left." "They took the men. The ones they didn't kill. Took the girls too." "We'll find them," Kat said. "Why would you?" the woman asked, tears brimming. "You're just medics." Kat looked around at her team. May, still pale but steady. Eli, already checking nearby houses. The others, nervous but upright. She spoke clearly, voice slicing through the air. "Not today." The wind carried the scent of fire and the faint echo of hooves. The bandits would return soon. Maybe tonight. Maybe with reinforcements. Maybe expecting another easy victory. They were wrong. Kat holstered her pistol and looked toward the old church at the town center. High ground. View of all approaches. She pointed. "We fortify there." And for the first time, the women did not unpack bandages. They unpacked bullets. The rain came fast, harder than it had any right to for a spring evening in the frontier. Cold River, already hollowed out from the bandits' earlier raid, now sat heavy and soaked beneath a gray sky. The streets turned to muck and ash, the scent of charred wood and rot thick enough to chew. Catherine Rawlins stood atop the church roof, with a spyglass looted from the mayor's house. Her boots squelched against the tarred shingles. She didn't flinch as lightning streaked above the mountains. Didn't blink when thunder cracked overhead. She was searching the tree line with practiced focus. "You see anything?" May called up from below, wrapping burlap around the broken window panes, trying to keep the wind out and the heat in. "Not yet," Cat replied. "But they're out there." She knew it in her bones, an ache like the one she did right before her brother died years ago, when they tracked a pair of stagecoach thieves into a ravine and walked into an ambush. That ache was never wrong. She slid the spyglass closed and climbed back down. Inside the church, the women were hard at work. Pew benches had been overturned to form barricades. Stained glass shards swept into corners. A handful of hunting rifles and Colt Navy revolvers lay across the altar, cleaned and ready. Eli sat in the back pew, sharpening a Bowie knife with a strip of whetstone. His face was pale, his limp more pronounced, but he was present. Alert. "I've reinforced the main entrance with fence posts and old iron grates," he said, not looking up. "Anyone gets through that, it's because we're already dead." Cat nodded. "Good. We won't let it come to that." May appeared at her side, wringing out her wet skirt with frustration. "They'll hit us tonight, won't they?" "Sooner." "Lovely." Cat motioned for the others to gather. 5 women, all medics once, now fighters by necessity. Their hands had stitched wounds, birthed babies, set broken legs. Now they held pistols with blood-stained grips. She laid a rough map of Cold River over a barrel. "They'll come from the south, like before. There's a clearing there we can trap with old timber and spikes. May, take Clara and Ruth. Set the charges. Booby, trap the alley between the butcher's and the general store. Use glass and pitch. When it burns, it'll make them think the town's already on fire." May nodded, sharp and certain, her face unreadable. "Sarah, you and Eli are with me. We'll cover the north slope and rig a bell wire between the bell tower and the back lot. If it rings, we fire." "What about the townsfolk?" Ruth asked, pushing her glasses higher on her muddy face. "They stay in the cellar. We've armed the few who can still shoot. The rest, pray." It wasn't a speech. No time for one. It was survival now. Orders given. Eyes steady. They scattered, quiet and fast. The trap-laying took hours. It was delicate work in the pouring rain, and the mud made every footstep feel like dragging a corpse. May led her crew with brutal efficiency. They used broken whiskey bottles, sharpened wagon wheel spokes, even the mayor's missing chandelier. When lit with pitch oil, it would explode like a firework. Clara, barely 21 and with hands better suited for bandages than bullets, dropped a glass bottle. May didn't yell. She just knelt, picked up the shards and said softly, "They wanted us helpless. Remember that." Clara's jaw clenched. "I remember." Cat and Eli rigged the wire carefully, stretching it taut between the high bell and a loop anchored to the fence post. The slightest tug would pull it free, send the bell into a slow warning chime. Eli wiped sweat from his brow, his bandages dark from the rain. "You think they'll be surprised?" he asked. Cat didn't answer immediately. "They'll laugh when they see us. Still, they think we're healers, not hunters." "That's the mistake," Eli said, cocking his revolver. "Ain't it?" By dusk, the traps were laid. The church had been transformed. No longer a place of worship, but a fortress. Firewood stacked near every window, ready to be lit. Every bullet counted and loaded. A hush fell over Cold River. The kind that didn't come from peace, but from things holding their breath before violence. Cat stood near the front entrance, listening. Her fingers tapped the revolver's grip in rhythm with her heartbeat. Thunder rolled again. Then, distant, too distant to be natural, came a sound like hooves. Ruth whispered, "They're coming." The bell didn't ring, not yet. But they all felt it. Cat raised her hand. "Positions." Everyone moved. The bandits didn't come quiet. They thought the town was dead. They hooped and shouted, drunk on overconfidence, riding hard into the square. Kat could see them now. 20 riders, maybe more, lanterns swinging, guns drawn. Some wore stolen cavalry coats. One had a noose tied to his saddle horn. She waited until they reached the butcher's alley. May struck the match. The explosion lit the night. Fire shot 20 feet in the air. Screams followed. Shrill, guttural. Glass burst. 2 horses bolted into storefronts. One bandit rolled, engulfed in flame, disappearing into the shadows with a howl. The rest scattered, confused, blinded by the sudden light. Kat yelled, "Now!" Gunfire erupted from the church. Not wild, not desperate, controlled bursts. Sarah picked off 2 riders from the bell tower, calm and deadly. Eli fired through the window slits, grunting with pain every time he moved. They'd practiced this. The bandits regrouped. A man stepped forward through the fire. His face was half shadow, but his voice carried clear as a preacher's. "Ladies," he called. "You've made your point. But I ain't in the mood to bury all my men tonight. Hand over the rest of the town, and we let you walk." Kat stepped out from the church doorway, rifle in hand, coat soaked and plastered to her form. Her voice was like ice. "You kill, you burn, you take what ain't yours. And now you want terms." The man grinned, teeth like a wolf's. "I want what I came for." Kat's eyes narrowed. "You're not leaving with anything but lead." The man chuckled. "That's what the sheriff said. Before I fed him to his own pigs." A shot rang out. The man stumbled, clutching his shoulder. May stood from behind a wagon, smoking pistol in hand. "Oops," she said. "Didn't mean to interrupt your villain's speech." Chaos followed. The bandits surged forward, guns blazing. But the women didn't retreat. They stood fast. Traps triggered. Hidden wires tripped. More fire burst from the alleys. One man fell screaming into a pit filled with nails and farm tools. Kat shot 2 with clean precision, reloading as calmly as sewing stitches. Her breath stayed steady. Her eyes were deadly. Clara, to everyone's shock, took a blade to the leg and still managed to shoot a man square between the eyes before collapsing. Ruth dragged her to cover, packing her wound with bandages soaked in liquor. "You'll live," she whispered. "But you'll wish you didn't tomorrow." Kat moved to the flank, scanning for the leader. He was gone. She rounded the back of the blacksmith shop and found him limping through the dark, bleeding but alive, trying to reach his horse. "You again," he rasped. "You thought we were helpless," Kat said. He drew a blade, but it was too slow. She shot him once, through the thigh. He dropped. She walked up, knelt, and looked him in the eyes. "You know how many boys I've stitched back together? How many I watched die with guts in their hands? I'm tired of sewing them shut." He spat at her feet. "You're just another butcher." "No," she whispered. "I'm their revenge." She didn't shoot him again. She left him crawling, screaming, dragging his ruined leg through the mud. Back at the church, the fight was over. The square was filled with smoke and the moans of the wounded. Only a few bandits escaped, running into the dark, terrified of what they'd seen. The women gathered on the steps of the church, burned, bloodied, shaking. May collapsed beside Kat and pulled out a cigarette with trembling fingers. "That," she said, "was biblical." Kat didn't speak. She watched the flames crackle, the bodies smolder, the townsfolk slowly emerging from hiding. One child approached her. Dirty, clutching a worn doll. She looked up at Kat with wide eyes. "Are you an angel?" Kat looked down, then away. "No, sweetheart," she said. "I'm what comes when angels are too late." May gave a breathless laugh, half-choked. "You think they'll come back?" Eli asked, leaning heavily on a broken shovel. Kat looked west, toward the horizon now glowing with distant torchlight. "They will," she said. "But next time they'll know better." As the rain slowed, the firelight painted their shadows long and dark against the church walls. The women, once medics, now looked like something else entirely. And the war was just beginning. The smoke hadn't cleared from the last battle, when the first scout was spotted at dawn. A flicker of movement in the tall grass east of the chapel wall, just enough to catch the light through the morning fog. May saw him first from the bell tower and didn't hesitate. One clean shot. The figure crumpled, face first into the dewy ground. They all froze. He wasn't alone, she whispered. No one argued. They had less than a breath's worth of silence before a low horn sounded from beyond the ridge. Not a cavalry horn. This was something guttural, animalistic. The kind of sound made by men who didn't follow orders, only appetites. Another gang. Reinforcements. Eli spat in the dirt. Guess the rats sent for more rats. Kat didn't look up from the map she was tracing with a muddy finger. Then we finish what we started. They moved quickly, the women reverting to roles they never asked for but had long since accepted. Ruth tended to Clara's stitched leg, checking for infection. Sarah polished the barrels of the last working shotgun, her face calm but ghostly pale. Eli prepped what ammunition they had left. 3 boxes of rifle rounds, 5 pistols, 2 grenades one of the townsfolk had dug out from an old mining cache. Just enough for one last stand. Kat wasn't interested in standing. We strike first, she said. May raised a brow. You suggesting we ride out? No. I'm suggesting we cut off their legs before they know they've entered the house. It was a risk. Everything was. But they couldn't afford to let the next wave dictate the tempo. So they laid a new plan. No barricades, no traps. Not this time. This time they would hunt. The terrain south of Cold River offered cover, but not much. Dense pine near the creek, rocky hills to the west, and a dead orchard sprawled in between. Rows of blackened apple trees, twisted and leafless, standing like gravestones. It was perfect. They split into 2 units. Kat took May, Sarah, and Eli. Ruth stayed behind to hold the church with the remaining townsfolk and Clara, still too weak to move without bleeding. I don't like leaving you, Kat told her quietly, packing extra powder into a belt pouch. I'd rather you be the tip of the blade, Clara replied. I'll guard the hilt. May grinned. She gets poetic when she's in pain. Kat mounted, double-checked her rifle, then gave a small nod. We end this. They reached the orchard by noon. The sky was heavy with unspent storm, the clouds dragging low like a blanket soaked in grief. From the ridge they watched the approaching bandits. 30 strong, mean-looking, covered in leathers and war paint. Some wore trophies. Ears on strings, belt buckles carved from bone, feathers dipped in blood. Kat saw their leader at the front, Kane Mallory. He was taller than expected, gaunt, with long black hair and a face carved by years of bad choices. He wore a crimson coat stolen from a dead officer, and rode a pale horse that looked half demon. Eli muttered, "That's him." "You sure?" Kat asked. "I'd remember the man who cut my sergeant's throat while laughing." May cocked her pistol. "Good. I've got a special bullet for him." They waited until the gang reached the edge of the orchard. The wind shifted. The enemy began to dismount, sensing something off, the stillness too complete. But Kat didn't give them time to piece it together. She whistled, sharp, short, like a songbird. The cue. Shots rang out from above. Sarah had climbed the far oak and picked off the first 2 scouts before they even dropped their saddlebags. May threw a stick of dynamite she'd hidden in a broken cider barrel. It exploded with a thundering roar, sending fire and branches into the air. Then chaos. The orchard became a killing field. Kat moved through the shadows like a wolf, rifle crack precise, breathing measured. She didn't scream or curse like the others. She was silent, calculating, calm. She aimed only when she could see bone. She fired only when it mattered. Eli limped behind her, covering her flanks. His shooting was sloppier, pain making him slow, but he was relentless. He dropped 3, reloaded with bloody fingers, and kept moving. May was fury. She danced between trees, close range, double-fisting pistols, and laughing like a woman who'd finally had enough. When her ammo ran out, she drew a carving knife and slashed the throat of a man twice her size. It wasn't a fight, it was a reckoning. Still, numbers mattered. Mallory's men regrouped near the northern slope, firing blindly into the trees, then charging. Kat's group fell back in stages, luring them deeper. But the bandits weren't fools. They realized soon enough they were being baited. Mallory called out, voice booming over the carnage. "You think this changes anything, woman? You think you'll scare us off?" Kat stepped out from behind a twisted trunk, rifle lowered. "I'm not trying to scare you," she said. "I'm trying to bury you." He aimed at her chest. Pulled the trigger. Nothing. She smiled. "You should clean your weapon." Sarah shot him from behind. Mallory stumbled. Shoulder torn open. He screamed, swatted at the air like he could claw the pain away. But then something shifted. From the western ridge, a horn blew again. Not the same one. A different pitch. More men. Kat's gut twisted. Reinforcements for the reinforcements. A second wave. "We pull back," she said, immediately. "Now." They retreated fast, under cover of smoke and confusion. Eli helped Sarah down from the tree. May lit another charge to cover their flank. By the time Mallory's remaining men gave chase, the women were already gone. Back at Cold River, Ruth opened the church doors the moment she saw them. "You're early," she said. "We're outnumbered," Kat replied. "By a lot." "How many?" "At least 60, and they're bringing dogs now. Scouting ahead." "Then we fight smarter." Kat nodded. "Everyone inside." "Now." Inside, the townsfolk braced themselves. Rifles were passed out. Molotovs lined the windowsills. The wounded had been moved to the cellar. Ruth had turned the altar into a command post, with all maps, weapons, and flares piled behind it. Night fell fast. Kat stood before them, hands on the altar, eyes sweeping over the faces. Young, old, broken, defiant. "They wanted us helpless," she said softly. "They wanted us quiet. Weak. Disposable. What they didn't expect, what they still don't understand, is that we're not waiting for rescue. We are the rescue. And we don't kneel to anyone." No cheers. Just grim, steady nods. Eli loaded a fresh cylinder into his revolver. "We gonna kill every last one of them?" "Only the ones who stay," May answered, brushing dried blood from her cheek. By midnight, the town was surrounded. The enemy didn't rush. They moved like they already owned the place. Mallory's shoulder had been wrapped in a makeshift sling, his face bruised, his expression furious. His men dragged torches, ropes, and cages. The bell rang once. Then again. The dogs were loosed first. The townsfolk had never faced animals in war before. Panic spread. A boy dropped his rifle. A woman screamed. But the medics, now fighters, held firm. Kat stepped forward and shot the first hound clean through the head. "Hold." May lobbed oil-soaked meat into the second pack, then lit it aflame. The fire spread fast, the dogs yelping and scattering. The enemy moved next. They came in waves, men screaming, torches burning, boots thundering down the main street. Ruth had rigged the fence line with black powder, and triggered it just as they reached it. A dozen were blown back into the dark. Still they came. Gunfire erupted on both sides. Smoke clouded the town square. Shouts, screams, and the metallic clash of steel on steel filled the air. Eli fought near the well, dropping enemies with precision until one tackled him hard. Kat reached him in time, blade drawn. She slashed the attacker's wrist, then the throat. Blood sprayed. Eli coughed and kept shooting. May was cornered near the mayor's old office, fending off two with an axe. She didn't win through skill, she won through fury. Screaming, stomping, biting if needed. Then, the moment came. Mallory breached the church doors. He stepped into the aisle, dragging a local boy by the collar, revolver pressed against his temple. "Drop him," he said, blood streaming down his neck. "Or I paint the pews red." Kat stepped forward. Calm. Silent. He sneered. "You don't have the stones." She didn't speak. Instead, Ruth, quiet, near the back, pulled the rope they'd tied to the chandelier. It dropped like God's fist. Mallory went down, crushed beneath oak and glass. The boy scrambled free. The gun fell. Kat walked up, picked it up, and aimed it at Mallory's crawling form. He looked up, snarling. You're not a soldier. You're nothing. Kat stared down the barrel. That's what you said the first time. She pulled the trigger. The battle didn't last long after that. With their leader dead, the attackers broke. The women gave no chase. They let fear do the rest. At sunrise, Cold River stood. Barely. Bodies littered the streets. Blood stained the dust. But the flag above the church flew steady. They gathered on the steps, tired and aching. May lit a cigarette with shaking hands. We should have been sewing up wounds right now. Ruth smiled faintly. We did. Just in a different way. Kat looked over the valley. Birds began to sing. And for the first time in days, she allowed herself to breathe. But she didn't let go of the gun. Thunder cracked so loud it shook the ground. A storm brewed over Cold River again. Clouds stacked thick like cannon smoke, pregnant with lightning and rage. The battle had ended only hours ago, but the women hadn't slept. There was no time. The survivors were hauling bodies from the streets. Smoke still drifted up from the torched blacksmith's roof. And at the edge of the hills, dust rose, new riders approaching. Catherine Rollins stood in the chapel doorway, soaked in blood not her own. Her coat clung to her like second skin. Her face, pale and streaked with ash, looked carved from something harder than bone. She held her rifle loosely, but her stance said she'd raise it the moment the world twitched wrong. They're not done, she muttered. Eli leaned against the church wall beside her, bandages fresh across his chest, one arm hanging in a sling. He'd lost too much blood last night. His voice was hoarse. Mallory's men were just the mouth. This is the rest of the beast. Kat nodded. May stepped through the ruined pews, tossing the last of the empty shell casings into a rusty pail. That storm's not just the sky anymore. That's boots. That's hooves. How many? Kat asked. May hesitated. More than we can count. And they're coming fast. The others were silent. Ruth checked on Clara, who was still laid out in the cellar, stitched up like a rag doll, but breathing. Sarah watched from the bell tower, her eyes hollow, hands shaking just enough to betray the strain of the past 3 days. A final storm. One more wave. And then there'd be nothing left but what they carved out of this chaos. Kat turned to the altar where a battered U.S. flag had been draped hastily over crates of ammunition and supplies. Beneath it, the remaining townsfolk huddled, watching her with that same fragile hope in their eyes. She addressed them without raising her voice. We've survived the first fire. We've taken down killers and outlasted devils. But what comes now? She paused. What comes now is everything we are. Everything we've become. A murmur rolled through the church. Ruth stood straighter. Eli clenched his jaw. May lit a cigarette and drew in like it was her last breath. They readied again. Not for a battle this time, but for a war. A short, brutal one. Kat led them out. The streets were slick with mud and blood. The barricades had held overnight, but barely. The gates were gone. 2 of the storehouses had collapsed from fire. And they had 13 bullets between them all. She didn't care. They set the town in silence. No speeches. No prayers. Just grit. Kat positioned Ruth and Sarah near the graveyard wall, higher ground. Eli took the steps to the water tower, though he could barely lift his rifle. May joined Kat in the center of town, near the gallows post, where she could move quickly and cut through the heart of the coming storm. And then the horizon cracked open. It wasn't thunder this time. It was war. Over 60 riders, mercenaries, criminals, killers, thugs, sent to finish what Mallory started. The ones too savage even for civilized banditry. Faces painted, weapons raised, screaming like they were riding into hell. The women didn't scream. They waited. Kat's heart pounded once, steady. Her eyes narrowed. Her grip on the rifle tightened. The riders didn't slow. They thundered through the town's open road, confident that Cold River had nothing left. That was their mistake. Kat fired first. Her shot took the lead rider in the neck. He tumbled, his horse rearing, disrupting the column. Then Sarah fired. Then Ruth. Bullets lanced through the riders like lightning bolts. May lit 2 Molotovs at once and threw them into the rear ranks. Flames erupted in the dirt, catching horses and panic alike. The cavalry shattered into pieces. But they were still too many. They flooded the town square screaming. One charged straight for Eli's tower. Another leapt the burned-out wagon, and nearly impaled Kat before she rolled and shot him point-blank. May disappeared into the smoke, knives drawn. She didn't come back out for a while. Ruth took one in the shoulder, fell, crawled behind the cemetery gate, and kept firing. Sarah dropped her last bullet, cursed, and picked up a rock instead. It all blurred. Gunfire. Screams. Fire. Mud. Kat moved like instinct, like something feral. She ducked between ruined buildings, shooting, slashing, kicking, jabbing with a broken bayonet when her rifle jammed. She was everywhere at once, soaked in rain, blood and smoke. She made it to the chapel steps just in time to see Eli fall. A rider had breached the inner yard. His saber came down in a silver arc. Kat's scream tore the air apart. She fired. The man's head snapped back, and he fell off his horse like a bag of meat. Eli didn't get up. Kat slid to his side, cradling his head. He blinked, breathing shallowly. "You mad, stubborn woman." "Shut up," she whispered, pressing a cloth to his side. "You're not allowed to die yet." He coughed. "You're terrible at comforting people." A hand grabbed her shoulder. She spun and drove her knife into the attacker's neck. The square was littered with bodies. Fire danced in puddles of whiskey and blood. The screams were fading. But the sound of hooves still thundered. More. Always more. Kat staggered to her feet, soaked and shaking. Then a voice echoed across the town. A new voice. Catherine Rollins. She turned. The final rider approached slowly. No paint. No yelling. Just stillness. He was dressed in polished gray leather, gloves pristine, rifle across his back. His eyes were bright and unreadable. His horse was jet black. He looked more like a judge than a bandit. "I heard you killed Mallory," he said. "I came to meet the woman who made men fear midwives." Kat didn't respond. He dismounted, slowly, hands visible. "My name is Thatcher. I'm not here to kill you. You're part of them. I'm what comes after them." He looked around at the wreckage, the fire, the dead. "You could leave," he said. "Take what's left of your people. Walk away. I'd let you." "No," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "You think you've won something here?" "I know I have. Your town is broken. But not gone." Thatcher took a slow breath. "You really think this changes anything?" Kat lowered her rifle. Not because she was done, but because she had nothing left to prove. "I was supposed to teach children," she said. "Not bury them. I was supposed to sew dresses, not wounds. I was supposed to help men heal,